Hi everybody. I'm going to do our reading for Harry Potter for today. It is Friday, May 8th. And when we were reading the last time, we know that Harry had gotten all of his stuff from Diagon Alley to go to Hogwarts. And on the train to Hogwarts, he met a boy named Ron, who has red hair and a pet rat. And he also met a girl named Hermione. And so we're going to see what happens with them now. They rode in some boats across the water after they got off the train, and right now they are getting ready to do the sorting hat to figure out which class they're going to be in, which house they're going to be in at Hogwarts. Okay. Move along now, said a sharp voice. The sorting ceremony is about to start. Professor McGonagall had returned. One by one, the ghosts floated away through the opposite wall. Now, form a line, Professor McGonagall told the first years, and follow me. Feeling oddly as though his legs had turned to lead, like metal, he's having trouble walking. He's so scared right now. Harry got in line behind a boy with sandy hair with Ron behind him as they walked out of the chamber, back across the hall, and through a pair of double doors into the great hall. Harry had never even imagined such a splendid place. It was lit by thousands and thousands of candles that were floating about in midair over 4 long tables. Where the rest of the students were sitting, these tables were laid with glittering golden plates and goblets. At the top of the hall was another long table where the teachers were sitting. Professor McGonagall led the first years up there so they could come to a halt in a line facing the other students with the teachers behind them. The hundreds of faces stared at them through like pale lanterns in flickering candlelight. Dotted here and there, the ghosts shone misty silvery. Mainly to avoid all the staring eyes, Harry looked upward and saw a velvety black ceiling dotted with stars. He heard Hermione whispered, "It's bewitched to look like the sky outside. I read about it in Hogwarts, a history." It was all too hard to believe that there was a ceiling there at all, and that the great hall didn't simply open to the heavens. Harry quickly looked down as Professor McGonagall silently placed a 4-legged stool in front of the first years. On top of the stool, she put a pointed wizard's hat. The hat was patched and frayed and extremely dirty. Aunt Petunia wouldn't have left it in the house. Maybe they had to try and get a rabbit out of it, Harry thought wildly. That seemed the sort of thing. Noticing that everyone in the hall was now staring at the hat, he stared at it too. For a few seconds there was complete silence, and then the hat twitched. A rip near the brim opened like a mouth, and the hat began to sing. "Oh, may you think that I'm not pretty, but don't you judge on what you see. I'll eat myself if you can find a smarter hat than me. You can keep your bowlers black, your top hats sleek and tall, but I'm the Hogwarts sorting hat, and I can cap them all. The sorting hat can't see, so try me on, and I will tell you where you ought to be. You might belong in Gryffindor, where dwell the brave at heart. Their daring, nerve, and chivalry set Gryffindors apart. You might belong in Hufflepuff, where they are just and loyal. Those patient Hufflepuffs are true and unafraid of toil. Or yet in wise old Ravenclaw, if you've had a ready mind, where those of wit and learning will always find their kind. Or perhaps in Slytherin you'll make your real friends. Those cunning folk use any means to achieve their ends. So put me on, don't be afraid, and don't get in a flap. You're in safe hands, although I have none, for I'm a thinking cap." The whole hall burst into applause as the hat finished its song. It bowed to each of the 4 tables and then became quite silent again. "So we just got to try on the hat?" Ron whispered to Harry. "I'm going to kill Fred. He was going on about wrestling a troll." Harry smiled weakly. Yes, trying on the hat was a lot better than having to do a spell, but he still wished he didn't have to do it with everyone watching. The hat seemed to be asking rather a lot. Harry didn't feel brave or quick-witted or any of it at the moment. If only the hat had mentioned a house for people who felt a bit queasy, that would have been the one for him. Professor McGonagall now stepped forward, holding a long roll of parchment. "When I call your name, you will put on the hat and sit on the stool to be sorted," she said. "Abbott, Hannah." A pink-faced girl with blonde pigtails stumbled out of line, put on the hat, which fell down over her eyes, and sat down. A moment's pause. "Hufflepuff," shouted the hat. The table on the right cheered and clapped as Hannah went to sit down. Harry saw the ghost of the fat friar waving merrily at her. "Bones, Susan." "Hufflepuff," shouted the hat again, and Susan scuttled off to sit next to Hannah. "Boot, Terry. Ravenclaw." The table second from the left clapped this time, with several Ravenclaws stood up to shake hands with Terry as he joined them. Brocklehurst Mandy went to Ravenclaw too, but Brown Lavender became the first new Gryffindor, and the table on the far left exploded with cheers. Harry could see Ron's twin brothers catcalling. Bulstrode Millicent then became a Slytherin. Perhaps it was Harry's imagination after all he'd heard about Slytherin, but he thought they looked like an unpleasant lot. He was starting to feel rather sick now. He remembered being picked for teams during gym at his old school. He'd always been the last to be chosen, not because he was no good, but because no one wanted Dudley to think they liked him. Finch Fletchley, Justin, Hufflepuff. Sometimes Harry noticed the hat shouted out the house at once, but other times it took a little to decide. Finnegan, Seamus, the sandy-haired boy next to Harry in the line, sat on the stool for almost a whole minute before the hat declared him Gryffindor. Granger, Hermione. Hermione almost ran to the stool and jammed the hat eagerly on her head. Gryffindor, shouted the hat. Ron groaned. A horrible thought struck Harry, as horrible thoughts always do when you're very nervous. What if he wasn't chosen at all? What if he just sat there with the hat over his eyes for ages until Professor McGonagall jerked it off his head and said there'd obviously been a mistake and he'd better get back on the train? When Neville Longbottom, the boy who kept losing his toad, was called, he fell over on his way to the stool. The hat took a long time to decide with Neville. When it finally shouted Gryffindor...
Mama, we have popsicles?
Later maybe, but not right now. I'm trying to read right now. Okay, I'll be with you in just a little bit. You go play. When it finally shouted Gryffindor, Neville ran off, still wearing it, and had to jog back amidst the gales of laughter to give it to McDougal Morag. Malfoy swaggered whenever his name was called, and got his wish at once. The hat had barely touched his head when it screamed, Slytherin! Malfoy went to join his friends Crabbe and Goyle, looking pleased with himself. There weren't many people left now. Moon, Knott, Parkinson, and then a pair of twin girls, Patil, and then Perks, Sally Ann, and then at last, Potter, Harry. As Harry stepped forward, whispers suddenly... Oh, my Siri decided it wanted... I said Harry, and it thought I said Siri. As Harry stepped forward, whispers suddenly broke out like little hissing fires all over the hall. Potter, did she say? The Harry Potter? The last thing Harry saw before the hat dropped over his eyes was a hall full of people craning to get a good look at him. Next second, he was looking at the black inside of the hat, and he waited. Said a small voice in his ear. Difficult. Not very difficult. Plenty of courage, I see. Not a bad mind either. There's talent. Oh, my goodness, yes. And a nice thirst to prove yourself. Now, that's interesting. So where shall I put you? Harry gripped the edges of the stool and thought, Not Slytherin, not Slytherin. Not Slytherin, eh? He said, the small voice. Are you sure? You could be great, you know. And all here in your head. And Slytherin will help you on your way to greatness. No doubt about that, no? Well, if you're sure, better be Gryffindor. Harry heard the hat shout the last word to the whole hall. He took off the hat and walked shakily toward the Gryffindor table. He was so relieved to have been chosen and not put in Slytherin that he hardly noticed that he was getting the loudest cheer yet. Percy the prefect got up and shook his hand vigorously while the Weasley twins yelled, We got Potter! We got Potter! Harry sat down opposite the ghost in the roof he'd seen earlier. The ghost patted his arm, giving Harry the sudden horrible feeling that he'd just been plunged into a bucket of ice-cold water. He could see the high table properly now. At the end nearest sat Hagrid, who caught his eye and gave him a thumbs up. Harry grinned back, and there in the center of the table in a large gold chair sat Albus Dumbledore. Harry recognized him at once from the card he'd gotten out of the chocolate frog on the train. Dumbledore's silver hair was the only thing in the whole hall that shone as brightly as the ghost's. Harry spotted Professor Quirrell, too, the nervous young man from the leaky cauldron. He was looking very peculiar in a large purple turban. And now there were only 4 people left to be sorted. Thomas Dean, a black boy even taller than Ron, joined Harry at the Gryffindor table. Turpin Lisa became a Ravenclaw, and then it was Ron's turn. He was pale green by now. Harry crossed his fingers under the table, and a second later the hat shouted, Gryffindor! Harry clapped loudly with the rest as Ron collapsed into a chair next to him. Well done, Ron. Excellent, said Percy Weasley pompously across Harry as Zabini Blaze was named a Slytherin. Professor McGonagall rolled up her scroll and took the sorting hat away. Harry looked down at his empty gold plate. He had only just realized how hungry he was. The pumpkin pasties seemed like ages ago. Albus Dumbledore had gotten to his feet. He was beaming at his new students, his arms opened wide, as if nothing could have pleased him more than to see them all there. "Welcome," he said. "Welcome to a new year at Hogwarts. But before we begin our banquet, I'd like to say a few words, and here they are. Nitwit, Blubber, Oddment, Tweak. Thank you." He sat back down. Everybody clapped and cheered. Harry didn't know whether to laugh or not. "Is he a bit mad?" he asked Percy. "Mad?" said Percy airily. "He's a genius, best wizard in the world. But is he a bit mad?" "Yes. Potatoes, Harry?" Harry's mouth fell open. The dishes in front of him were now piled with food. He'd never seen so many things he liked on one table. Roast beef, roast chicken, pork chops, lamb chops, sausages, bacon, potatoes, boiled potatoes, roasted potatoes, fries, Yorkshire pudding, peas, carrots, gravy, ketchup, and for some reason, peppermint humbugs. Okay, we'll carry this on later.